What's up, boys? So in true fashion, since we talked about Anemo Traveler last week, I said I would talk about Geo Traveler this week, and because the Inazuma is drawing closer and closer, it's probably a good time to at least consider building your Traveler if you are looking forward to that. If you by chance stumbled onto this video and actually are more interested in building your Anemo Traveler out, I do have a video which you can check out in the corner. Just please do remember, if you are going for the Electro Traveler stuff, just make sure that you don't try to farm out a ton of talent materials or anything like that. Like the books and stuff that you get are going to be exclusive to the region. You can go ahead and farm out your Ascension stuff. Just don't waste any resin on trying to get talent materials, because they're not going to transfer over to the Electro Traveler once they release. So essentially there are two distinct directions that you would want to go when you build your Geo Traveler: full elemental damage, or the geo damaging build, and then the physical damage approach. Typically the physical build isn't preferred at the higher AR, but you can still use it to a pretty decent effectiveness, especially if you are wanting to get into geo damage later on and you may just not have weapons and artifacts set up for that yet. You can definitely go with physical build until then. Geo damage is typically the more solid option as like a main DPS or even sub DPS in like a quick swap style team. So let's first take a look at that geo build, and then we'll talk about physical build in a bit. So the main bulk of the weapon choice that you have here isn't nearly as energy recharge percent focused as we talked about in the Anemo Traveler build. Usually for Geo Traveler you have like enough battery going on in your team comp to compensate for the energy recharge, and you don't really need it, and you'll usually have some in your substats anyways that you don't really have to choose a weapon. Should you feel like your burst doesn't get to be used as often as possible, if you don't have it ready when it comes off of cooldown, of course you can go into the energy recharge option for your weapon, but typically you would want to eventually try to work out of that and go like a little bit more DPS focused. So the weapons that I actually have on screen here are basically separated into like 3 different categories. I would say each category basically holds the same weight as each of their peers inside that category, but you would eventually want to try to work your way up to the top categories if you can, and all of them kind of are very similar inside of their own categories. Like Primordial Jade Cutter and Summit Shaper are very similar in the amount of damage that they can output depending on like what setup you have around the Traveler. Just overall general weapon, Primordial Jade Cutter is typically going to be the highest DPS output, but in the right team, Summit Shaper can actually outperform it. One thing you may notice is that we do have Harbinger of Dawn in there, and it is pretty high in the second tier. The reason for that is simply because the amount of crit damage that you can get off of that and the flexibility that gives you in your artifacts is super nice. So that's one thing to consider, and it's a super free-to-play friendly weapon, and it outperforms a lot of things simply because it allows you to build your crit rate, crit damage so effectively. And that's also a similar reason to Skyward Blade being rated in the 3rd category rather than higher, simply because you don't usually need energy recharge nearly as much, and things like Festering Desire actually overall helps your DPS more, simply because you will end up be using your elemental skill, and the boost that Festering Desire gives you at refinement level 5 is so much better. And when it comes to artifacts, these are going to be kind of self-explanatory for the most part. So 2-piece Glad, 2-piece Archaic is going to make a ton of sense here. Extra attack percent, and of course the geo percent. 2-piece Noblesse and 2-piece Archaic work really well. Or if you don't already have or are using Geo Traveler as your sub DPS and you need a 4-piece Noblesse, then 4-piece Noblesse of course makes tons of sense, especially since sometimes the team doesn't call for having a 4-piece Noblesse user, and Geo Traveler fits that role pretty easily. Typically for your main stats, you would always want to go with attack percent, geo percent, and crit percent, depending on, you know, crit rate, crit damage, whichever one gets you closer to the 1-to-2 ratio. Essentially, that's pretty much cut and dry. It's going to be the same. You typically wouldn't want to go with energy recharge like we talked about unless you just absolutely positively needed it, but typically you won't. And for the substats, of course, this is going to also be pretty cut and dry. Crit percents, of course, as you know, DPS focused machines always want more crit. Attack percents and energy recharge is where you would want to fill in here. You definitely want to put those in your substats rather than a main stat. And then any kind of flat attacks would work really well as well. Now down to your talents. As a geo focused damage dealer, your skill and your burst are almost equal in terms of what you would want to boost up, and it really would come down to what you plan to use Geo Traveler for. In the correct team, it would make sense for the burst to be leveled up first, or in the correct team it would make more sense for the skill to be leveled at first. It just really depends on how you are going to build around the Traveler to kind of decide between those two. honestly, it would honestly be up to personal preference a lot of times. Your normal attack, typically you're not going to use it super often. If Traveler is the main carry of the team, of course, this would be a lot more important, but typically you would want your burst and your skill first before you ever level up the normal attack. Moving on to the physical build, the weapons, they're pretty much the exact same. Maybe one or two of them might switch to priority in the tier, but they don't really like change tiers altogether. Like Prototype Rancor, if you're running a physical damage Traveler, obviously would make more sense to run over something like the Flute or even the Alley Flash. The Alley Flash is honestly like one of the craziest weapons that I've been messing with lately. It has such a high base attack, it's not even funny. It does have element of mastery on it, which isn't great for Traveler, but it's a beat stick nonetheless. But obviously, you know, physical percents make ton more sense here. So like Aquila Favonia would obviously take precedence over maybe like Lion's Roar and Primordial Jade Cutter. Just kind of depends. And still Summit Shaper is kind of team dependent, so you can just kind of pick and choose whichever one you feel most comfortable with. And honestly, it's really what it comes down to what you have. Now for the artifacts for physical build, this one's going to be pretty simple. There's going to be a couple of things that we would really want to mention here. So there's 3 sets that you can really choose between your 2 pieces. If you wanted to go with 2-piece Pale Flame, 2-piece Bloodstain, or 2-piece Glad, any combination of those 3 would work really good. You could go with 4-piece Retracing Belied, which would also be really good. Especially it kind of is more dependent on your team, not so much since you do have Crystallize and stuff, but it would be more reliable if you had a shielder on the team that could provide shields all the time. But typically Retracing Belied works great here. 4-piece Gladiators works amazing. And here's the thing, I would love to recommend 4-piece Pale Flame because I do think that it is amazing. But the problem with Geo Traveler is the cooldown on your elemental skill isn't going to really allow you to do a lot of maximizing with the 4-piece set bonus that you would get from 4-piece Pale Flame. If you are using some sort of interesting build, if like I was thinking before I started recording, if you were going with like Sacrificial Sword and 4-piece Pale Flame, that could maybe be kind of cool because you could reset your cooldown every so often on your elemental skill to help keep up the 4-piece Pale Flame set bonus. That would be kind of cool, but that's super like niche, and I don't think typically most people would want to go with that. So in general, you would usually want to stay clear of the 4-piece of Pale Flame. You'd usually only want to do 2 pieces of that and then 2 pieces of another set, just simply because cooldowns aren't going to work in your favor. Now, as far as main stats go, it's going to be, again, attack percent, crit percents, of course, on your circlet, but of course, we are going to do physical percent on our goblet this time, and our substats are pretty much going to stay the same. Any kind of crit percents, attack percents, energy recharge, of course, is amazing to put in your substats again, and flat attacks also make a ton of sense as well. Now, for your talents, it is going to be a tad bit different because you are going to be a physical carry, and I'm assuming that you're going to be using Traveler on the field in between your rotations of your other characters. They would predominantly be on the field more than the other characters on your team, so you would usually want to do normal attack first. Your skill and your burst are kind of even depending on how you use Traveler. Typically, I like going burst first just because you do get like crit bonuses and stuff like that out of your burst, and that kind of stuff is really nice, but you use your skill usually more often, so it kind of just depends on how you feel comfortable. They're pretty even, but it really comes down to personal preference between the two. Now, because we don't actually use any kind of like stacks and get any kind of bonuses for any kind of skills or bursts or anything like that, our biggest thing to really focus on when it comes to like damage rotations and like how to maximize DPS here is to really think about how you weave your normal attacks with your charged attacks and using your stamina. It's literally a stamina game when it comes to characters that don't use stacks or anything like that, and you basically just want to be able to maximize the amount of time that you can use your skills to basically keep your burst up as often as possible. Back in the Anemo Traveler build, I did actually go over this spreadsheet. It is completely finished, and since that video, I have actually released a video kind of detailing how this spreadsheet works and how to like make sense of it and actually utilize it. Anyways, there you can definitely go and watch that video because it goes over a lot more in depth on how to use the spreadsheet, and then you can go through and define how you want to do your combos, and it just makes it a lot easier for you to come up with things so that you can maximize your damage for your talent levels and stuff like that. Now, when it comes to teams, this is probably going to be the more interesting part of the video for a lot of people, and myself included. First and foremost, I do have to call out Geo Resonance is like the main thing that Geo Traveler has going for it. It doesn't really matter who fills the role as the other Geo character on the team, but someone definitely needs to do it. Zhongling is top notch here. Ningguang is amazing. Albedo's awesome, and Noelle is amazing. So there's really no bad options, and the upside is pretty freaking good. I mean, Enduring Rock is an amazing resonance, and it gives you so much benefit just by running another Geo character. And since you are Geo Traveler to begin with, it gives you 2 flex spots to really work with. If you are going for more of like a quick swap style team, those 2 flex spots could be anyone that you really would want to weave in and out of. I really like the combination of Child and Hu Town a lot of things, so I automatically kind of jump to that. But honestly, it can be anyone, and it's a super fun team that you can really do. And just adding in like Geo Resonance on top of any team is just... But if you really do want your Traveler to be the main character on the field dealing the damage, you do have some cool options here. You could go ahead and choose another Geo character like we were talking about for that Resonance, and then you can go ahead and just choose one more. That's 3 Geo characters for those of you that are barely listening. So much Geo energy flying around that no one's really gonna need energy recharge that much, and then throw Bennett on the team and perfect. I mean, you've literally been seeing this team in the background for probably a lot of this video, and that's because it's super fun to use and it's really freaking good. You could also go with one other Geo and 2 characters that generate off-field reactions, something like Fischl and Xingqiu, Fischl and Zhengling, Xingqiu and Beidou, Beidou and Zhengling, whatever you like. It really doesn't matter. Another interesting idea would actually be 2 Geo and 2 Anemo, something like Venti or Sucrose, coupled with Jean. That would be really cool. Not super meta, but still extremely interesting to use like constructs and then do stupid things with the Anemo with Jean and doing stupid fall damage. Like, that stuff's just really cool. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't touch again on the Anemo versus Geo debate. I did touch on this in the Anemo video just a little bit, but I will kind of reiterate some points just in case you don't watch that video and try to elaborate a little bit more since we are in the Geo video now. The overall damage that the Traveler can output on the field just isn't quite on par with other characters. For instance, even without any characters from the gacha system, you get Kaya, and Kaya on average has a higher move value per hit than Traveler. If that actually sounds confusing, all you basically need to know is that you would benefit more from building Kaya than building Traveler as a physical focused DPS. You already have a better option than Traveler as soon as you start the game. But that means that it's just more useful to build the elemental focused DPS versions rather than the physical versions. So when it comes to Anemo versus Geo, the deciding factor literally comes down to what role you would want that character to fill. For me, Anemo has always been more of a Veridescent Veneer user support kind of role, which is an amazing supporting role, don't get me wrong, but that kind of pushes Anemo Traveler more into the supporting role rather than a more on-field DPS kind of character. Whereas on the flip side, because Geo has access to the Enduring Rock and the Resonance that we've been talking about, and to be fair, Anemo Traveler can of course take advantage of that as well, but it takes 3 people on the team to make Anemo Traveler have it, whereas with Geo Traveler it only takes 2, so you get 2 more flex spots for more off-field damage and more overall team damage. It just makes a lot more sense to me to run Geo Traveler as the DPS focused option. But in general, Geo Traveler is just easier to build in my mind for that role, so whatever suits your fancy, it really comes down to personal preference or whatever the situation calls for. And I will be super excited to see Electro Traveler when they finally release. So that's actually going to be it for the video today, guys. Hopefully you guys came in knowing a little bit and left knowing a little bit more. Like I did state earlier, I do plan to move into probably Razor. He is supposed to be on the Kazuha banner. By the time this video goes out, it probably isn't going to be confirmed yet. So hopefully if Razor is on his banner, I will definitely be doing him next. If not, I mean, I still have to make videos about Kazuha anyways, so we'll see where we go with that. But anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed. Hopefully this helped in some way, and yeah, join the Discord because it's fun. See ya.